This is Breaking the News Plus on a Friday night. And tonight, like we've done a couple of times before, we're going to talk to one of our producers with our investigative team because yet again, they have come out with a story last night that is shocking, cruel. And while the title says unusual, too sadly, it's not all that unusual. Kelly Dietz joins us actually from New York, where she was just getting an award for the work our I-Team has done, to talk about the story last night. So just to briefly set it up, Kelly, this involves a postal worker who was working the night shift, didn't feel well, and left work. Take it from there.
Yeah. So to bring you up to speed, his name is Kingsley Bimpong, and he was a USPS postal worker, worked at the distribution center, was leaving work and ended up driving into oncoming traffic and hitting a center median, got pulled over by Eagan police. And there was no smell of alcohol on his breath. So what is called a DRE was sent out to the scene. It is a drug recognition expert or drug recognition evaluator. They're both interchangeable. Sent out to the scene to specifically evaluate whether or not Kingsley was on drugs. And I don't know how much you want me to reveal, but from that point, those officers are specifically trained to do a 12-step process, a rigorous process in making their determination. That process was not completed. The lawsuit involved in this case and alleges that on body cam you can hear the officer speaking about it and saying, you know, does this person need to go to the hospital, and that for what, and that completing the evaluation would just, quote, be a waste of time.
Right.
So that evaluation was not completed. However, Kingsley was found to be charged with a DWI, thrown in the back of the cop car. Our news report shows body cam that the officer in the front of the car is asking questions. Where do you live? And Kingsley says, I don't know. All of the questions that he was asked, he answered, I don't know, which could have been a telltale sign that there was something medical going on, but it wasn't.
And that brings us to, before we get to the tragic conclusion of this story isn't about not getting everything done on the front end and just somebody gets a DWI and that's a bummer. This guy eventually dies. And what your report shows us and what is alleged in a lawsuit that is filed on behalf of this guy's family against Eagan and several others is that he clearly was having a medical emergency and he was ignored.
Yes, he was ignored, and he was not given the help that he needed. When every minute counted, he was thrown in a jail cell, and frankly, the evaluations over the course of hours in Dakota County Jail came through from jail guards as inmate and cell okay, just filled out over the course of hours. The same thing. And the truth was that Kingsley was rolling around on a jail cell floor, sometimes urinating on himself, oftentimes rolling around and just suffering. And by the time he was foaming at the mouth, a female jail guard finally said, like, what's going on here? And a big part of that our investigation uncovered was obviously, you know, step by step what happened, but a big piece was body camera at the jail, that when paramedics were trying to administer Narcan, because they were still under the guise that this was a person who was on drugs, trying to administer Narcan to get him to wake up. And it wasn't working. And one of the paramedics said, like, you know, what's going on here? And one of the interior staff mentioned, well, this guard is not checking when he's doing rounds. He's just scanning. And that was something that we heard on body cam. And that revealed that the legally mandated checks that were supposed to be happening were not happening accurately. And that was leading Kingsley to be determined as okay when he was so clearly not. By the time he got to the hospital, he was declared brain dead. And he had a stroke the whole time.
The whole time had a stroke. I know your investigation also found post-mortem there were no drugs in this man's body. But let's go back. Let's try to do some benefit of the doubt. Even though there is evidence in your report, I encourage everybody to watch it because you will see what happens to this man on video. When he is clearly having some sort of issue, and I can imagine he's pulled over, he's driving the wrong way, he's slurring his words, he's falling down. An immediate assumption is he's drunk or he's on drugs. But that's why they call the specialist, right? To determine if he's having a medical emergency or if it's drugs. There's a specific job to be able to determine, because every sign he was showing was also a sign of stroke.
Exactly. The training through the Minnesota State Patrol that this person went through is specifically designated to be able to tell the difference between a medical emergency and a person who's under the influence. There are specific line items that go over things like signs and symptoms of that seem like drug impairment, maybe actually mimicking stroke symptoms, looking for things like confusion, looking for things like a drooping of the facial structure. And you can see in the video that Kingsley looks like one side of his face is not operating, one side of his body is not operating properly. He's answering questions repeatedly. I don't know. Where do you work? I don't know. He's wearing his USPS vest. So yeah, at a time when it wasn't just, this is anybody, this is someone who has the specific knowledge base and training that is supposed to be able to make this determination, and not finishing that evaluation and just making the determination beforehand resulted in something really, really bad.
Oftentimes in your investigative work, Kelly, your team deals with documents and corroborating all sorts of data to fit together. In this specific case, which is why I'm also urging people to watch the report, is all of this is on video. I don't see any way to escape the reality of what a person sees here. And so that to me says that the family has a compelling case against the county and the jail workers.
Yeah, not only was he charged for a crime that he never committed, there was steps that should have been handled that were not along the way, starting with the DRE officer that did not complete his evaluation, up to the guards that were checking off boxes that this person was sitting in a cell okay when they were so clearly not okay, and not given medical help, not given attention, and just left to his own devices as he was quite literally suffering. We're journalists. I've seen a lot of video in my time. This was horrifying. It really was horrifying to watch, and knowing the information that we knew, watching it from the outside, you are screaming at your screen, just saying like, somebody please help this man, because he's suffering and he can't communicate at that point. So yeah, it's devastating.
To be noted, I think I read in your report, he's a father.
He is.
A family.
Yeah, so Kingsley's family, the lawsuit that it has been filed is obviously on behalf of his family. And while we did not interview his family for the report, we did speak to some of his friends. And the feedback that we got when we were letting them know that we're doing a report, because that's, as journalists, what we always do, was just good. I'm glad that this is coming out.
For those folks who are going to watch the report that our I-Team did, it's called Cruel and Unusual. It aired last night. It's on our website. It's on YouTube. You should check that out. In the report on TV, we didn't have a response from the people named in the suit. After your report came out, there was a city statement from the city of Eagan. It says basically hours after they transported this man to the jail, it was discovered that he had experienced a stroke. They go on to say, while his death is tragic, he was not exhibiting an objectively serious medical condition that was obvious to lay persons at the time he was in the officer's custody. Now, I take that statement and I think back to that specialist that is called to the scene, called to the accident. Isn't that person supposed to be a person that's able to flag it?
Yeah, I would say that that's not a lay person.
Right.
That's a person who is specifically trained to be able to identify, who went through rigorous training to be able to identify in their specialty the difference between those having a medical and emergency when things like stroke symptoms are clearly laid out. Confusion is one of those things. There were signs from the beginning, from that traffic stop, that Kingsley was not acting normally, and as the lab records showed there were no drugs in his system.
And we should say,
So the person
too,
who,
I was going to add,
go
too,
ahead.
Kelly, from what I saw on the video, and you can speak more to this, perhaps you saw more. And for the folks who were just watching this, and maybe we'll watch the story next, I see no signs from Mr. Kingsley that he is resisting arrest. That he's not combative. He's not doing anything. He's lethargic. He's clearly going through something.
Yeah, there were times in the back of the cop car where he had fallen asleep. There were times in the back of the cop car where he was snoring. He just couldn't respond the way that any normal person would even have the awareness to really understand what was going on. It is very clear he's just, there's points where he gets booked and he comes back into the cop car as he's being transported to the jail, and he's trying to get his leg in the car, and the officers have to help him get his leg in the car. Watch your foot. Doesn't move his foot. Have to move his foot because he's not even understanding like how to get into the vehicle. Couldn't stand up by himself. What needed two people on either side of him to help him walk. Um, you know, he
And
was
I-
incapacitated.
Yeah, and I get, if you take this statement on its face and it's just an officer who was patrolling and pulling somebody over and they take them again, that's not a layperson, it's an officer. But again, it's important to note that that second person came in who was trained, and that person, now correct me if I'm wrong here, Kelly, was also trained on what a stroke looks like, not just what
Correct.
drugs look like. They were trained on what a stroke looks like. And they said,
So their
we're not going to do
primary-
it.
Yeah, so their primary training is for drug recognition. However, as a part of that training, you are supposed to know and understand that some symptoms may mirror other underlying medical diseases. And so that is laid out very clearly. And to make the decision that not completing the 12-step process in order to make that determination was, again, quote, a huge waste of time, was the decision that was made that night.
And regardless of, something that came to mind for me, because there is no resistance of arrest or no threat to the officers at the scene in this particular instance that we're watching, even if it is drugs, or if it were, which it's not, it's been made clear in your report, there's no evidence of drugs, the toxicology says no drugs. The way the person is treated by the time they get to the jail by like really not checking, this is just kind of like a series of, I don't want to say missteps, that feels too small, but a series of failures on behalf of this person.
Yeah, there was just steps along the way. It wasn't one thing. He could have gotten help. I mean, who's to say? Because he was already suffering a stroke. But at any step of the process, he could have gotten help, and this went on for hours. By the time that he was helped, he was brain dead. So, a stroke is a very serious medical condition, and at any point, those seconds counted. There's some graphic details about medically what was happening to his brain, what was happening to his skull. It is not pretty, and that was a result of over a period of time him suffering because of this medical condition that could have been treated immediately or at any time before he had died.
Kelly Dietz with our investigative team, just giving you the kind of inside information from their view. Again, this is now a lawsuit. It's filed in federal court accusing the city of Eagan and Dakota County of deliberate indifference in Kingsley's death. Kelly, thank you. We appreciate your work.
Thank you, Jenna.
We'll see you next time on Breaking the News Plus.